are required to identify whether you will be a work site for work cover purposes. If that's the case, you're required to do induction training in the construction industry. And these are offered by a whole range of registered training organisations. Some you can do through Glen and those sorts of places. A lot of RTOs will offer them. But it's important that you're aware that you do have some other obligations about looking after the safety of the people who come onto your site. In terms of the actual risks, there are some financial risks associated with being an owner-builder. A lot of people come and talk to me about being an owner-builder because they think, firstly, that it's cheaper, and secondly, that it's quicker, and thirdly, it's easier, and fourthly, because they're going to make more money. Now, I can see lots of people smiling and nodding their heads, and if it works out like that, great. I'm sorry to tell you, this isn't the block, okay? This session is designed to give you an understanding of the realities of being an owner-builder. These are the realities that I'm afraid you won't get on a reality TV show, okay? And that's why it's really important you understand even something as simple as the financial risks that you have. For example, security staff all night, then you're the one who's going to wear those risks, okay? There's a whole range of quality and time risks associated with that. Do the plans you have meet all of your requirements? Is everything being done in accordance with those plans? Are you able to get hold of the builder when you need him? What happens if it rains and you can't get the excavator on site? If you've got the builder booked for 3 weeks' time and that all gets pushed back, is that builder that you need still going to be available? They're all the sorts of things you need to take into consideration because these are genuine risks in planning your activities. Also, you have some future obligations that you need to be conscious of as well. So, for example, if you build a house as an owner-builder or you do some significant renovations, additions and alterations, you become responsible for a period of up to 6.5 years after you finish that work. So if you decide to sell the house that you've built, you are required to have some insurance that protects you in the event that something goes wrong after you've already sold the house. And that's really important to understand as well. I talked before about the worker risk, but you also need to think about general access risks. So people walking past. The last thing I think anybody would ever want is somebody to fall down into a swimming pool hole they've dug. So they're the sorts of things that you need to take into account as well, okay? There are some ways to protect yourself from these risks. Some of the most important things is what you're doing today. It's about becoming educated and informed, learning what they are and knowing what you can do about it. But if you look at a broader picture, being able to take out appropriate insurance. Now, I mentioned before that if you sell a property that you've done some work on, you're required by law to have insurance, but there's obviously some other insurances you're going to want to have as well that will protect you and your property. Another good thing is to enter into building contracts. Now, we refer to a major domestic building contract. What this means is that if you're entering into a contract for work with a registered person, at a value of over $10,000, you are actually considered to have committed an offence unless you've taken reasonable steps to ensure they are registered tradespeople. Now, I'll go through that again and I'll break that down a little bit for you. So if you're entering into a contract valued at over $10,000, now sometimes there are works below that $10,000 mark where you need it. But if you are entering into a contract, it's important, actually vitally important, that firstly you make sure that the tradesperson is registered. And you can do that on the VA website. We have a Find a Practitioner tool. But unless you do that and you take those sorts of steps, you're considered to have broken the law. So they're really important things as well. Now, there's a whole range of other risks that I'm sure you can think of that I haven't gone into detail about today. For example, do you live in an area that's considered to be bushfire prone? If that's the case, then there's a whole range of other things that you need to do in relation to clearing out your block, the materials that you're using for your construction and those sorts of things. Also, if you're looking at doing some renovations or additions or work to your existing property, if it was built before 1990, chances are it's got asbestos in it. Okay? So they're the sorts of things you need to take into account as part of the planning for what you're doing for anything that you want to do under your owner-builder project. Okay, so now we've talked about what it is to be an owner builder. We've talked about whether you're eligible. We've talked about the risks. We've talked about your obligations. Is anybody still keen? Oh, good. I'm glad there's a few hands up there. And as I said at the start, this wasn't designed to turn you off the idea. It's just about making you understand what you need to do. Now, if we get through all of those steps and you still want to go ahead, then obviously you need to apply to us to do it. Now, in order to become an owner builder, I said you need a certificate of consent from the VBA. To get that, you apply online through the facility called VBA 360. Or go to a friend's house because you can only build online. Fill out an application form and post it to us, but we don't do that anymore. We've modernised the system, and everybody agrees that the new system that we've got in place now is a much more cost-effective and efficient way to manage the system. As part of the application form, as part of the application process rather, you have to demonstrate to us that you are conscious of everything I've just talked about. And we basically group all that together. We talk about it as being a demonstration of the prescribed knowledge. So when you go through the study guide, it will outline everything you need to know. At the end of that process, you sit an online assessment. It's called e-learning. Now, it's a 100% pass mark. So if you don't get anything right as part of that application process, you need to go and resit the test. And it's not that difficult. Trust me, if you go through the study guide, you should have no problems being able to understand what's in the system and the questions that you could be asked. So if you demonstrate that you've got the prescribed knowledge, you provide the application form to us, you lodge the certificate of title, then you're able to go through and lodge the application form and pay the fee. Excuse me. The application fee is about $98 at the moment. Certificate of consent will last you 1 year. Okay? And then the VBA will issue the certificate of consent, and then we have what's called a public register. This has been designed to protect consumers to ensure that people can see when a property has been built or had some significant work done to it by an owner builder. This is on the VBA website. Anybody can check it. You need to know that when you get issued with a certificate of consent, it will go on the public register. It won't identify you by name, but it will certainly identify the address and the type of work you intend to do. Conversely, if you're looking at buying a property, you can go online, do a search, and check to see whether the house or the unit or the flat that you want to buy has had work done on it by an owner builder. So I think you'll agree, it really is a great tool to be able to protect consumers. That's jumped ahead too far. I do apologise. The last slide basically was to demonstrate to you where to get more information. So the VBA is formed part of a group represented at H24. So it's over next to the big ass fan, if I don't upset anybody by saying that. So it's Consumer Affairs Victoria, Domestic Building Disputes Resolution Victoria, and also Consumer Affairs, and the Victorian Managed Insurance Authority. So they're all over there, provide some assistance for you. We have the study guide, and I see a few people are holding these. I cannot recommend strongly enough that you come and get one of the study guides if you're even remotely considering being an owner builder. We also have some great little giveaways over there. Great for the kids, great for the oldies. It's got a little post-it note. It's got a tape measure, a spirit level. Hours of fun, trust me. A lot of work went into that one. They've been very popular. And we've got a great team of people over here to take any questions you may have. So thank you very much. That said, I will now invite any questions that you may have as well. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks for that. And I was wondering if you've got work being done on your property over 10,000 and you've got a registered builder to do it and he hires someone who isn't a tradesman at all and they cause the problem, who actually gets the flack from that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. For those that didn't quite hear that, the question was, if you enter into a contract with a registered tradesperson at value of work over 10,000, and then they engage someone or they subcontract somebody else who may not be registered, and if something goes wrong, who's at fault? This one comes back to basic contract law. So at the end of the day, and that's why it's really important that we say to people, firstly, make sure they are registered, and secondly, make sure you've got that contract in place, because that contract protects protects all of your interests and outlines quite clearly who's responsible for what. Okay, so the contract you have will be with that registered builder, for example. Okay, so you will have recourse through Consumer Affairs and certainly through contract law in the courts if something was to go wrong. But ultimately, you have that contract in place with the registered builder, and that's who's responsible to you. So that's where your recourse will be. If there's something goes wrong, and there's no reason why builders can't subcontract to other people, and depending on the value of work, the person they're subcontracting to may not be required to be registered. So it's not that he's just not registered. He may not have to be registered, and there's some dollar thresholds around when a tradesperson needs to be registered themselves. So there's no problem with that. But it just means that if something does go wrong, it's up for the builder to chase that guy to fix things. But ultimately, that's not your concern. The contract you have is in place with the registered builder or the registered tradesperson, and that's where the recourse is for you.
Hi, if I'm doing an interior renovation and I wish to break down the work packages into smaller pieces, is it possible to do it, to break down into small enough pieces to not be eligible to apply?
This is a question I get asked a lot, generally not from the people looking to do the work, but from the builders that they want to engage to keep them under that threshold amount. It can be done. But ultimately, we will look at the motives for that. So if you're doing it to make it easier to manage or to give you access to the funding to basically give you the capacity to do it, then there's no problem with that. The only time we ever get concerned is if somebody comes to us and says, my builder has asked me to do it this way, so there's no requirement to go through all the formal regulations and all of the administration about that as well. But in terms of being able to do it yourself, and you're just looking at engaging people to do it and doing some of it yourself perhaps, absolutely no problems at all.
You mentioned that the certificate of consent only lasts a year. What happens if you need a year? Do you apply it again, or do you pay a sum of money to renew it?
Okay, the certificate of consent, as I said, yes, lasts for 12 months. If you don't do anything, so if you don't get a building permit, it will lapse up to 12 months. Okay, so you get consent you to actually undertake the work. If then you have a delay. You may find that the building permit, the timing of that, may allow you to incorporate that type of delay inside that period. If not, then certainly if you don't have a building permit, you will need to apply for a certificate of consent after 12 months. That's correct.
Hi, I'm a recent owner builder, and I'm pleased to have got my building permit only yesterday. But my question is, I'm building an extension to an existing house, greater than 20% of the area of the existing house and less than 50%. How much of the mandatory building requirements of 2017 apply to the extension?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but in terms of, there are some particular rules, you're right, about how much work you're doing in terms of the size of the house and the percentage and those sorts of things. But in terms of how much of the rules apply, generally it's all of them. And particularly when I'm talking from a technical perspective about regulations and codes of building codes and those sorts of things, it's a very specialised question you've got. So if you don't mind, I'll take that one offline. I'll come and have a chat to you because I'll need to get a little bit more background and understand your thinking behind that question if you don't mind. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. As I said, we're at H24. Please feel free, come down, pick up one of the study guides. We've got a team of great staff there that can assist with any questions you may have. Thank you very much for your time.